it's about being so fully involved in what you're doing that nothing else seems to matter. And you're this way engaged in something that's extending you, like extending your skills, extending you as a person. If you think about, well, can you turn flow on or off? No, you can't. You can set the stage for flow, but you can't actually just decide that I'm going to be in flow. The sense of action awareness merging, that is, you become one with the activity, having a total focus on the task at hand, a sense of control in what you're doing, a loss of self-consciousness.
Hi there, and welcome to the Supporting Champions podcast. Now, my name is Dr. Steve Ingham, performance scientist by trade and training. And in these discussions with performance experts, practitioners, and performers, I explore how we deliver performance, how we support others to perform, and the underpinning knowledge and concepts at play. I really hope you enjoy the conversations from today's episode or from the back catalogue. And if you do, it'd be great if you can take a chance to like and subscribe to the channel, or for the audio, take a moment to leave a review. It really helps the show. Right, let's get into the discussion.
Well, welcome to the Supporting Champions podcast, everyone. Today, I'm honoured to have with me Sue Jackson, an acclaimed psychologist known for her pioneering work on the concept of flow. Now, Sue has co-authored key texts like Flow in Sports with Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi and brings depth of expertise in high-performance psychology. Now, her recent book, Experiencing Flow, Life Beyond Boredom and Anxiety, is out now. Welcome to the podcast, Sue.
Thank you so much, Steve, for having me. Looking forward to our discussion.
Now, did I get the name right? Csikszentmihalyi.
You did it.
Give me a mark out of 10
very
for
well.
that.
Well,
Okay.
I didn't think at all, so I would say 10 out of 10.
Oh, fantastic!
And no,
I'm in the I'm in the
yeah.
flow already.
I think you must be, because other than people that work in the area, people always stumble over that name. So you did really well.
And I love the fact that you just simplify that for everyone in the book by calling him Mike. Is that is that the easiest way?
Yeah, so we can refer to, and that's what his first name Mihaly, he translated that in the US where he spent most of his adult life to Mike, and because he was living and working in the US, and so Mike Csikszentmihalyi, or simply Mike.
Fantastic. Hey, look, well, give us your background, Sue. If people don't know you, we sort of touched on the fact that you're a collaborator and working with Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, or Mike. Give us your intro.
Okay. Well, probably the interesting part is how I came to work with Mike. I'm from Sydney, Australia, although I'm based now in Queensland, Australia. And I had done a first degree in human movement and psychology. And then I was learning at that time, which was the mid-80s, about sports psychology. And having come from a sports background and enjoyed my first studies in human movement studies, I decided, well, this is something I'd like to pursue. And at the time, North America was a leading place to study. So I applied. I researched a little bit about different universities. University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign had an excellent sports psychology program, and that's where I ended up. And Mike Csikszentmihalyi was at the University of Chicago for most of his academic career. Final years were at Claremont Graduate University in California, but when I was actively working with him was primarily when he was at the University of Chicago. So when I read the first book I read on flow, Beyond Boredom and Anxiety, I was like, wow, this is that state that is the optimal state that as an athlete I'd experienced, and never thought that it was more than a random occurrence. And yet I was reading about people that were not just athletes, but people from different walks of life, all reporting that when they were totally focused on what they were doing, that they could slip into this state called flow state. And the participants actually used the word flow, like things seem to flow and so on. And that's how Mike decided to use that word to describe this, what is now a well-established psychological concept. So for my master's, I included study of flow in elite athletes. And then for my PhD, I did an in-depth qualitative research, which at the time in the early 90s was quite novel in sports psychology. My PhD advisor, Dan Gould, was one of the people who, he was a combination of a very successful academic and also practitioner. And much of the time, research projects came about from discussions with national sporting bodies in the US, and they wanted to understand the experiences that their athletes were having, and so it led to qualitative research, interview-based research. So I was Dan's research assistant. I learned a little bit about how to do it and about the richness of that data, and then I went on and did my PhD looking at flow experience in elite athletes across 7 sports. And then I returned to Australia. I've worked as an academic for many years. And then I realized that what got me into sports psychology was really wanting to make a difference and working with people. I enjoy working with people. So I've transitioned from academic to a practitioner role as a performance psychologist. So that's my current work. So that's probably
Wonderful.
a little outline, but anything that you want to follow up on, please do.
So you have been blessed with the most incredible supervisory support over time with Mike and Dan Gould, a real pioneer. I think I've got Dan's books back here.
Yeah, Dan's books are legendary in the sports psychology field.
So you all have mentors to thank over the years for the support and the inspiration that we've had. Right. So what is flow?
Flow is an optimal psychological state when you are totally involved in the task at hand. You're not thinking to past or future. And because of your total absorption in what is by definition a challenging activity, so we don't achieve flow when we aren't challenging ourselves in some way. So because you put yourself in a challenging situation and you've decided to focus fully on the task, that's the link with optimal performance, because you tend to perform really well. As everybody knows, like if you're fully focused on what you're doing, you tend to perform better than if you're kind of like sort of focused and sort of not, and so on. So it's that combination of being in a challenging setting, and there are many characteristics. Like there is 9 known dimensions of flow, which we can cover as you're interested. But like just simply, it's about being so fully involved in what you're doing that nothing else seems to matter, and you're this way engaged in something that's extending you, like extending your skills, extending you as a person.
And what are the feelings that are associated with that? Are they common or are they varied depending on each individual?
Again, there is consistency, but I'm sure that there's also individual variation. But athletes and other performers, so like I'm talking here about athletes, I assume that's probably the most relevant audience.
I think it is, but it's also, I think it'd be really interesting to hear of other examples, because a lot of people are interested in high performance across the board, and we do have a number of guests on that have performance backgrounds, non-sport too.
Okay. Yeah. So the experience is enjoyable. And one of the reasons that it's enjoyable is that we let go of what usually accompanies us as we go through doing things of an evaluative nature, and that is self-consciousness. And when we're in flow, because all of our focus is on the task, we stop worrying about ourselves and we stop doubting ourselves, questioning what we're doing or being critical of what we're doing. And therefore, we tend to enjoy it more. And also, it's just this sense of, you have a sense of being in control, and you're just so connected with what you're doing. So for a performer, whatever the performance is, like that feeling of just being really connected with what you're doing is a big motivation for why performers will continue to push themselves and go back and train hard and want to do that activity because of that feeling when everything is going well.
Mm. And does it differ for athletic, physically demanding performances? Does that differ, say, from a musician or a chess player or a craftsperson who's perhaps involved in something technical, but not the heart rate isn't high necessarily?
Yeah, well, I think that that's a very interesting area. And Csikszentmihalyi actually studied chess players. Musicians have been studied, and there is a physical component, obviously, to playing a musical instrument. And so there'd be possibly or probably some heart rate elevation and so on, but perhaps not to the same extent as in a sprint event in athletics, for example. And so I think that there's probably in the sporting world a physiological hormonal factor as well, like in terms of endorphin release and so on. So like some of your listeners might have heard of the runner's high, which is probably very similar to flow, but it really emphasizes that feeling of that physiological high that you get when you do push yourself, when you challenge yourself physiologically.
And what's going on in the brain in terms of the flow state? Alpha, beta, gamma waves, and so on. Is there an increase preponderance to enter a certain brainwave state?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question where more research is being done. I just want to sort of say at the outset that it's a very difficult area to research, and that's not just looking at brainwave activity. Researching a subjective experience has many challenges that go along with it. And that's before we even try to look at what's happening physiologically or neurophysiologically. And if you think about, well, can you turn flow on or off? No, you can't. You can set the stage for flow, but you can't actually just decide that I'm going to be in flow. And so like most of this neurophys research obviously happens in laboratory environments, which therefore means that activities that are studied at the present time are primarily activities like gaming and so computer gaming and so on, where there's actually quite a significant body of research looking at flow.
Right.
And I'm sure everyone's familiar with the popularity of gaming, and perhaps one of the attractions is, this flow experience. And there's a number of factors actually in gaming that make it conducive to flow, but also you could put neurophys measurements onto a person and not really disrupt them, which you can't do for an athlete too well.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly it's starting to be done, and as technology continues to increase, there'll be more and more of this looking at what's going on physiologically. But still, even in the field, it's no guarantee someone's going to experience flow, but it's still interesting to know what people are experiencing at that physiological level, and then correlating that with what they self-report they're experiencing and so on. So just wanted to say it's not like there's quite a bit written about it, and there is some empirical research on what's happening in the brain, but there's also like variance between studies. Yeah.
Okay.
But
interesting.
Reduce beta brainwave activity, suggesting a reduction in conscious thinking and that self-reflexive activity I talked about, self-consciousness, optimal physiological levels of arousal. One thing that's interesting in flow is that you perceive that what you're doing is somewhat effortless, and the concentration indeed is perceived as being effortless. And there seems to be some downregulation of the parts of the brain associated with effortful activity. So these things all make sense. And then another thing that's absent is the usual monitoring of yourself. So those self-referential aspects, the time monitoring, another aspect of flow is that we often lose track of time and so on. So yeah, there is some support for changes of this nature or activity of the brain of this nature. But as I said, it is an area, I think, really awaiting more technological advances and more people researching this state. Like, this state really matters. It matters not just for performance. To Mike Csikszentmihalyi, and what I learned is it matters because of the quality of experience it provides us, and that quality of experience really matters. Like, that we have this enjoyable experience, that we have these moments of full engagement, that we extend ourselves and so on. This really matters. So I think I would
I
like to
love
see
that
more research.
I love that in the book. It just felt like there was. This is about promoting quality, a life well lived, as one
It
of
is.
your subchapters, and if I take the sort of zoom out approach of why you might want more of this in your life, is that there is the productivity, but there's also performance, and there's a sense of that mastery and craftsmanship, but also that enjoyment. There's a sense of this is great. I love this. I'm immersed, and
yes.
yeah. Let me just ask a few other questions before perhaps get into factors of influence flow. How does it differ from clutch-based states? And I'm interested in this because I think that probably when I was studying in the 90s, flow was sort of held up as, or in the zone was the term I was really familiar with. That people talked about being in the zone with respect to their gold medal winning performance. And that encouraged people to be thinking about mindset prior to performance and the tactical mental skills that you would do prior that would allow you to get the best out of yourself. And that was sort of seen as the antithesis of this sort of really rugged, I'm going to really try and drive at my performance. That almost felt like it was tense. But I hear and I read a little bit more about a clutch-based state when actually you might not be feeling great. You might not be in a flow state, but you're going to get a performance out. How does it differ?
Yeah, sure. Kind of like what you've said there, Steve. Clutch generally involves, and I'm no expert in the area, but the idea of a clutch, is that you clutch something out of a really difficult situation. So you're really like, you're in a very challenging situation. I guess that's a similar experience to flow, but you don't experience this effortless concentration. What you're doing feels more effortful. It's hard work. You're gritting it out, like, we use that term sometimes. And yeah, I think that from what I've read, clutch isn't an enjoyable experience to be in. Like, it might lead to a good outcome that you're satisfied with in terms of performance. But, I think what makes flow so special is the quality of experience is so positive. It's so optimal compared to a clutch state, for example.
Yeah. Okay. So, whilst flow might allow time to just whiz by, clutch slows it down. Perhaps.
You're kind of waiting, and yeah, and sometimes that's going to be like it is.
Yeah.
It's not, as I said, flow isn't an easy state to achieve. There's no flow switch, and even the really best athletes, you can't guarantee flow, or some people might argue that you can, but I don't think Csikszentmihalyi would endorse that. He has written extensively about flow and that it's not an easy state to achieve. However, that it is accessible.
And so then you have a nice section on factors that influence flow. Could you take us through some of those?
Sure. Okay, so there's a number of factors. coming back to that challenge situation that I mentioned, like you're in a challenging situation and you trust your skills that you can meet the challenge. And so there's what's called a challenge skill balance. And so when you get that right, and that's all very individual, it's just an individual state. And so it's when your challenge is higher than your usual level of challenge, which then stretches your skills to be higher than what you might do in an average or usual performance, to create something special. So you've got this challenge skill balance happening. For an athlete, things like optimal preparation, that includes physical preparation and mental preparation. I recall athletes talking about the performance feeling good on the day as being important. You get that before the event, like you get that sense that, yeah, this is in sync today. This is feeling good. And so then that leads to more trust when you come to the very high challenge of actually competing in a challenging environment. There are some factors that we have less control over, and this is again what, especially in sport, which is dynamic, and there are always factors we don't have control over, like the opposition or even like your teammates. And so when if it's a team sport, and definitely flow is reported to be experienced in teams, the team has to be playing well but also interacting well, the communications, positive communications. And then there's some things like what's happening in the environment, the optimal environment for your event, particularly if it's outdoors, for example. But then it might be indoor, outdoor, but then there's the situational environment. So it's the interpersonal aspect that might be happening that's either helping you to be really focused on what you're doing, or is perhaps leading you to doubt your abilities, which can happen with sometimes coaches inadvertently trying to motivate players, perhaps are leading them to have some doubts, or it could be parents, it could be teammates, it could be the opposition, a number of different interpersonal influences that can affect. So that, these just are some of the areas that influence whether or not flow occurs. So you can see there's a lot that we don't have control over, but what we do have control over is our focus. As in, we always have the choice about what we're going to focus on, and so being able to focus fully on the task is very conducive to experiencing flow, obviously.
When I look through the list of items, I mean, you just described, there seem to be, as you say, some things that you're just not necessarily going to be able to control. Some things that you can simply do that will enhance, such as being prepared, having pre-competition plans and event-focused plans, optimal physical preparation, readiness. Those feel like...
You've got the list in front of you. I don't.
Have I? I've done that as well. I've written a book and I can't remember what I wrote in it. You must have been in the flow. That sense of, hey, look, I need to pack my bags. I need to make sure I practice my warm up routine, and I'm ready to go. That sense of routine triggering a state. There also feels as though there are some attitudinal approaches, being highly motivated, mental state,
absolutely, yeah,
feeling positive. Which my assumption, it's not just a passive thing. Am I feeling positive today or not? As you say, there's a choice about how I approach this performance, and what am I choosing to do? Today's going to be a good day because I'm going to choose to have a good day. That type of approach. But there also seems to be some opportunities to reframe. So if the situational conditions, I don't know, for example, if it's raining really hard, as it does in Britain, rather than thinking, oh no, that's going to affect my performance, that you could have an opportunity to embrace that characteristic, so that it feels like it's an active process as well, to be able to encourage the probability.
Oh, totally active process. Yes, Steve. It's not you sit back and hope that all the conditions line up for you. Um, but I think that the one area we have the most control over is what we choose to focus on or to refocus on. So, like, refocusing was also seen as the ability to, if you did lose focus, to get that focus back without it taking too long, because you don't have that luxury of time in most sporting events. And so being able to notice where your attention is, have it on the task, or if it wanders, bring it back without any judgment. And this is where there's an overlap with mindfulness. And I write extensively about mindfulness in the book. Is I've just described some of the qualities of mindfulness as well.
And so, the 9 dimensions, those are slightly different, are they, than the underpinning factors that might encourage?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. There are 9 dimensions, and in his later research, Mike identified that 3 of those 9 dimensions were actually seen as what he called and came to be known as preconditions to flow. And then the others were more the experiential aspects. So the 3 preconditions, I've touched on one. The main one is the challenge skill balance. The second precondition is having clear goals. And the third precondition is receiving feedback, immediate and clear feedback. So that kind of sets the stage. So even though athletes reported these things as being part of their flow experience, Csikszentmihalyi thought that they were more like precursors to then having this immersion. So then the 6 immersive aspects or experiential aspects of being in flow is the sense of action awareness merging, that is, you become one with the activity, having a total focus on the task at hand, a sense of control in what you're doing, a loss of self-consciousness. I've mentioned some of these, transformation of time. And then the final one is seen as the cumulative or end result, which is, it's called an autotelic experience, but that basically translates to an intrinsically enjoyable experience. So there's those 6 factors are more about the actual experience, and then the 3 prior ones are more about setting the stage.
This episode of Supporting Champions podcast is sponsored by Athlete Now, the perfect platform for sports practitioners looking to expand their reach. Whether you're a sports scientist, therapist, or coach, Athlete Now helps you showcase your expertise, connect you directly with athletes, and grow your business. With no ads, no commissions, and access to industry discounts, is designed to make your services stand out. Join as a practitioner today to get listed, promote your services, and connect with athletes who need your support. And for athletes, it's free to sign up, giving you access to exclusive discount deals and direct connections with the best in the industry. Visit theathletenow.com to find out more. Okay, so the challenge skill balance there is that there's an appropriateness of the difficulty versus your competence. And that can obviously ratchet up.
Very much so.
So you could be a beginner and have some simple skills, but if the challenge is appropriate to that skill set level, then you can achieve flow. It's not necessarily related to competence.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, because I think when we start talking about flow, particularly in sport, people tend to gravitate towards, it's for the elite end, but it's for anyone who is able to identify what the skills are, what their skills are that are needed for this challenge. And the beauty of sport is that both challenges and skills are readily identifiable, right, at all levels, from beginner through to the very elite professional levels. And so it's about being able to challenge yourself a little bit, but not such that you would end up worrying or being anxious, which is what happens when you're in a challenge that exceeds your skill level by too much, is that the experience of anxiety is predicted. So it is a fine balance, and it's probably one that has to be constantly readjusted, particularly in a dynamic environment. Yeah. So, and the other thing about challenge skill balance, Steve, is that it's kind of obvious, but probably worth mentioning is that it's a psychological model. So more than what the objective challenge is, or any objective measure of your skills, if that could be assessed, is your perception. So it's your perception of the challenge and it's your perception of the skills. So you could be in a really challenging situation, but you've decided to mentally check out. And so, it's like, and that sometimes athletes do that, bring an attitude, oh, I don't care, and because the challenge is perhaps challenging them a little too much and causing them to slip into anxiety. So it comes down to perception of challenge and perception of skills.
Hmm. It feels like my Spanish lesson yesterday, where I was having a nice conversation, and then we got down to the practice, and I was given a task, and suddenly I just thought, no, I don't know what I'm doing, and I kind of froze up a little bit. My skill set needed developing to meet the challenge of the task and the activity that I was going well. I wouldn't say flow, but it was good until then the rubber hit the road, and I was like, oh no, that challenge is a bit too much for me, and it meant that I was definitely not going to be in that situation.
Right. And close to flow, like you said, it might not have been flow, but another psychological state described in this model of challenge skill balance is control. So control is very close to flow, but control, if you looked at the gradients of difference, the skill is slightly above the challenge in control, whereas in flow it's flips, and so the challenge is slightly above the skill. So I mean, we perform really well when we feel in control, obviously, and then the thing is if you want to feel in control, that's great. Just try to get the challenge skills at that level where the skills are slightly higher than the challenge. But if you're willing to extend yourself and go a little bit out of your comfort zone, that's where something exciting can happen, as athletes will describe, by really stepping into a place where they fully have to trust their skills in a very high challenge.
Yeah, I like that phrase. Just go a little bit out of your depth that you had in the book, which
not mine, David Bowie's.
Oh right, David Bowie, fantastic.
There's a quote by Bowie. I heard him interview an early years interview with him, and he was talking about what makes for good performance, and he was saying, go a little bit out of your depth, go a little bit into the water than you feel you're capable of being, and when your feet aren't quite touching the ground, you're just in the right place to do something exciting. So that's a paraphrasing of what Bowie said, and I really think that captures it so well. And obviously he was an example of somebody who did that, and the accomplishments and the boundaries that he pushed in music, they're legendary, really. And so I think that it helps us to understand how somebody that achieves great things and perhaps does push the boundaries a little bit in their field, how they're willing to take on the challenge. They're willing to put themselves a little bit out of their comfort zone.
And so perhaps that relates a little bit, or it explores that idea of goals, in the sense that it's very easy to think about practice, free throw, basketball shot practice, or that element of training and performance in sport. You can think, am I doing the right thing? Is it producing a performance that correlates with the rules and the standards of that performance? But whereas actually with David Bowie, you're talking there about the exploring the and innovating an artistic form, aren't you, really? That he's trying to push the boundaries of artistry,
Mm,
I suppose the two are linked, aren't they? The goals and the immediate feedback. What am I trying to
mm,
achieve? But also,
mm,
am I on
mm,
track? Am I getting that sense of information that is supporting and ratifying what I'm doing, and it's progressing me?
mm, for sure. And that's exactly right, Steve. The clear goals and the feedback go hand in hand. And the clear goals is not, oh, I want to achieve this long term goal. It's when you're engaged in the activity, you clearly know what it is that your actions need to be to achieve the performance that you're seeking. So it ties into your sort of outcome goals, but it's more of a action based, moment by moment awareness of uh, this is what I need to do right in this moment. And then you get feedback, and sport's great, as is music as well, like for giving that immediate feedback. As long as we've got good level of awareness, like if we don't have that good level of awareness, we might miss some important feedback. So, being tuned in to the activity is important there.
And if I could jump across to total concentration, because
Mm,
thinking about am I on task? Am I going in the right direction towards the goal that I'm trying to achieve, and that I'm getting feedback that I'm on track? I can see how that would immerse you and deepen your sense of performance. Um, I'm just interested to get your take on concentration and how well we're doing as a species in this, whether our attention is under attack. And this
very
feels
much
like
so.
something that you need to create a good habit around for you to
Mm,
achieve flow. Total concentration
mm,
these days um, is often I'm trying to do a task, but I've got my email tabs open, my WhatsApp is
mm-hmm,
pinging me, and
mm-hmm,
and the postman's just been, and the dog's
mm-hmm.
barked, which are sort of day-to-day activities, but we seem to have a poor attention economy at the moment. This feels like
No,
it's quite important
absolutely.
to remind us that this is something we need to do quite intentionally.
Mm. Yeah, you're spot on there, and I think that is a big part behind why mindfulness has been uptaken to such a degree that it has. And that's because, and we can talk about mindfulness and flow, like mindfulness is being totally in the present moment, noticing where your attention is and bringing it back, which is kind of like that focus, refocus of flow. And so I think, mindfulness is probably a skill that we can all access. And the reason that I think that it's become so popular is that there's this increasing recognition that we're spending so much of our time, a lot of people anyway, not in the present moment because we don't have to be, or we're constantly distracted from the present moment. And as well as interfering with task performance, so we're not going to do as well on something if we're just giving ourselves some attention on it, particularly as the challenge rises. It's also like stressful, like, if all those things that you just described are happening all at the same time and you're trying to do good quality work, it's pretty hard. Like, there's this agitation, I think, this mental agitation. There's also like this sense of pressure to always be doing the next thing and to rush because there's always the next thing to be doing and you've got to keep up. And so, you know, the negative impact of not concentrating, of not being in the present moment, it's known to have deleterious effects on mental health. Increases in anxiety and then also cholera and depression as well, because it's not enjoyable. It is stressful, and it's not productive.
Hmm. And so, how, as a psychologist, if you're supporting performers, um, how do you encourage them? What are the tips that you give people to be a bit more to enter a flow state or to remove some of those distraction barriers?
Mm. Um, as I mentioned, I think that mindfulness has a very important role to play. So Mindfulness, either the informal practice of bringing awareness to where your attention is at any moment in time, or the formal practice of meditation that trains our mind to do the opposite of what our lives in society these days train our minds to do. So the society we live in is training our minds to be distracted, and that's why meditation is so important, because it's providing a way for us to actually experience being present and to notice when we're not present in our attention, and then some ways of bringing our attention back. So I think that for me, that's probably the most important, particularly as you've said, like we have this attention crisis in our society today. And so like if we were to think about and you asked me like what's flow, and the first thing I said is at the start of the interview, like it's being totally focused on the task. Like that's the kind of signature quality of flow. And if we can't focus attention on a task for very long, we're not going to be able to experience flow. So it's very important that we learn about how to focus better, how to be in the present moment. And, so mindfulness is one way. And, I understand not everybody's going to be like a fan of that, but like it might be a movement-based activity that allows you or encourages you to be in the present moment. I mean, sport does that. Competition can be somewhat antithetical sometimes. It depends how good your focus is. But like activities that are movement-based, that require us to be fully focused, to be engaged in those activities. So Pilates, yoga, martial arts, and so on are examples there. But it's really comes down to find something that you like, that you've got a skill level in, and that you're going to be motivated to do, that you find meaningful. So yeah, we can, while I'm suggesting that mindfulness is an important pathway, I also recognize that there are other pathways.
And that feels like it's something that you can do within certain types of tasks. It also feels like something you can practice away from the tasks, meditation or mindfulness. But equally, when people need to get something done, it feels as though there is a required discipline to be able to support that concentration. Shut down those windows if you're doing a task. Remove distractions. Be active in setting a time boundary so that you... it's you have these little productivity apps these days, 25 minutes of focus, and then the alarm goes off, and you think, I need more time. These feel like they're supportive of productivity, getting stuff done, as well as that enjoyment state that you're referring to.
Yeah, definitely. And we see more of these productivity apps and hacks all the time for the same reason, is that much of what we do when we're working, particularly if technology is involved, has that potential to be distracting or to get us to be task switching. So if we're constantly switching between the document that we're working on in front of us, and then the email notification comes in, and then maybe some social media notification comes up on your phone, if you've got these things silenced, or if there's still some visual cue, or there's just that, that behind that task you're working on your computer is your email, and that might be really interesting just to check if somebody's emailed you back. And, it's kind of like, we need to develop a discipline, I think, to do quality work if we want to produce quality work.
And how does that relate to the term that you used through the book, boredom? Are we getting caught just feeling bored, or that we are feeding a system in our brain with attention that it's trying to sort of satisfy an interest and an engagement with the outside world, but we're inherently bored? Is that what you're referring to? Somewhat in the book.
So boredom there's a 4 and an 8 channel model of flow that's described in the book, as you obviously know. And So just simply the 4-channel model initially had flow in the upper right quadrant, and that's the intersection of challenge and skill. Anxiety in the, did I say upper left? No, yeah, upper right for flow, upper left for anxiety, where challenges outweigh skill, and then bottom right, boredom, and lower right, apathy. So boredom basically in the flow model is described as your skill so far outweighs the challenge of what you're doing. You don't need to be paying attention, but then you don't pay attention. And so you find it really unsatisfying. You get distracted really easily. You can't wait for it to end. It's all like this antithesis of flow, which it is what it is basically, is that, and that might happen in sport. It might happen obviously in work settings if people aren't given meaningful work where they are challenged. Yeah, you can't expect people to be engaged in work that doesn't require that their skills are going to develop and that the challenge is going to increase. And that's, I mean, sports a great example of the challenge is always increasing, right? And then athletes are getting more and more skilled for the higher challenges that are constantly taken on. And, you know, when we see something amazing like a world record or whatever, nobody's ever done that before. Or going back to Nadia Comaneci in the 76 Olympics, you know, the first perfect 10 when gymnastics was scored out of 10, you know, then they had to change the bar. Like gymnastics is a great example of that. I couldn't have athletes having 10s all the time. You know, it's great for Nadia to have done it and it was amazing and all. But so then they had to change the whole scoring system. And that happened over a period of years where it's no longer out of 10, like the execution's out of 10, but there's a difficulty score that's independent of the execution. And after each Olympic cycle, that difficulty score or the difficulty scores for each skill change. And so some are upgraded, some are downgraded. And so because at each Olympics or World Championships and athletes are putting in these amazing performances, they're like, oh, well, you know, for somebody to do better than that, we're going to have to raise the difficulty. So, I mean, that comes with negatives, obviously, as well, like the demand for perfection and the pushing and the intensity. But yeah, sport in general is that was just one example of how like the challenge is kind of like there's no real end to it. Like it's just, I mean, I guess there is some end eventually, but we see it in other sports too, you know. What seems to be like something that can't be improved on gets improved on, and hopefully without drugs. And so yeah, it's a great environment for individuals to find flow. It's also a great environment for people to challenge themselves and to grow. So one of the things, we haven't touched on it yet, but one of the things that Mike Csikszentmihalyi said was important about flow is that it encourages us to become better versions of ourselves, so that we're constantly growing. We're increasing what he calls psychological complexity, which is an ability to take on greater challenges and to cope with them in a positive way.
And does that relate to the mastery pursuit, the idea that you are just getting great at something?
Yeah, so mastery I touch on as well, obviously, in the book, because I found in my research that having a mastery mindset, that is when you're focused on personal growth and improvement, I found that for athletes that took that perspective into what they were doing, they reported more frequent flow experiences than athletes that were focused on outperforming others. And so mastery perspective, known by also terms such as growth mindset, where it's this sense that you can always improve and that you improve through a combination of effort and developing skills and strategies and so on. And that your focus is on how do you challenge yourself to the next level. And everybody can do that. You don't have to be an elite athlete. Everybody can challenge themselves to take on the next step and in so doing, to find real enjoyment and meaning in that endeavor.
And you had a section around understanding mastery through task and ego orientations. Is there any difference between the two, or do they complement each other? Does this feel? I'd love to get your thoughts on how this sort of differs from intrinsic, extrinsic motivation, about how you're developing or what flow is giving you.
Mm. So task orientation is another word really for mastery orientation. Different researchers have used different terms. So it's a focus on the task. Mastery is a focus on personal improvement, but it's self-referenced. And ego orientation is about, obviously, your ego, and that depends on other people and how you do in relation to other people. And that has less positive association with flow than the task orientation or the mastery orientation. And so I think that learning to challenge yourself, learning to trust your skills is going to be more conducive to flow than just deciding that you're going to put yourself in more and more difficult competition, because then you'll be challenged because all these people will be better than you, and you're going to focus on trying to like outperform other people. Like that, just it's taking you away from an ability to put all your focus into the task, whereas the mastery or the task orientation encourages you to focus on the task, because your goal is to develop skills, your goal is to improve, and so you know that the best way to do that is to focus on what you're doing.
Love that. I think that feels like an attention that can get pulled in different directions, and again, an active process to pull that back to focusing on the task, focusing on the process, rather than worrying about what people think or what the outcome might be, things that you can't necessarily control. I mean, it would just be lovely if you've got any final tips for people, Sue. I mean, you've covered so much in terms of the things that people might want to do or encourage them to do to achieve a state of flow. But if you were sort of to summarize that, if people are thinking, yeah, you know what, I want to add a little bit more quality into my work. I want to get things done. I want to pursue mastery. I want this to feel a little bit more enjoyable as an experience, whether it's sport, work, the arts, whatever it might be. What would be your top tips to develop more of a flow state day to day?
I'd say to find an activity that you enjoy, that you have the opportunity to develop skills in, and that has personal meaning for you. And if you find something enjoyable with personal meaning, you're more likely to engage with it and to challenge yourself. So if something, you could find something enjoyable and you go and do it because it's relaxing, and that's great too. It's not like the aim isn't to always be in flow, but it is to maybe access it sometimes. And so enjoyable plus meaning means that we're more likely to challenge ourselves because it matters to us. And then I think this definitely came through with athletes that I've interviewed, is trusting yourself and not allowing self-doubts to come in those times when you would like to be in flow, because as soon as you start second guessing or criticizing yourself or taking on board the criticism coming from other people and letting that impact you, obviously that's another negative influence, then you're not going to get that challenge to your balance right. You're going to move from potential for flow or being in control even to anxiety, where you're no longer thinking that, oh yeah, I can do this, or I've got the potential to do this. You're actually thinking, can't do this. And so, enjoyable activity, one that you can develop skills in, one that has meaning, and then learning to trust yourself in when you are in the moments of performing. And just by choosing, even if your general attitude is, no, I don't trust myself, but, I work really hard and I push through it. Like, if you just try, just like as an experiment, maybe on this occasion, I'm just going to decide to trust myself, and then over time, just make that choice more and more often. I think that it is such a critical skill, because it doesn't matter what level of performer you are and what realm of performance you're in. I found that confidence can be very fragile, no matter, and I'm sure you're probably familiar with this yourself, Steve, like, no matter the successes that someone has, confidence can be easily shaken in many of us, and learning and kind of being attuned to if that's happening and you're starting to doubt yourself, and then having good skills to bring yourself back to the present moment, focus on the task, and let that self-doubt just dissolve. Which is a lot easier for me to stand here and talk about doing than to do, obviously.
It feels like that David Bowie quote is really important, of go a little bit out of your depth. That lovely analogy of being just not be able to touch the bottom of the pool. That feels as though it's encouraging, because it means that you're only one step away back from a safety, comfort zone.
True.
Yeah. And I really enjoyed looking through the book, and I'm looking forward to delving into it. For people who haven't really looked at flow previously, I'd really encourage them to have a look. So the book, for anyone who's interested, experiencing flow. And for me, there was one quote that just stood out in the book. So optimal experience is the bottom line of existence. And for me, that just feels as though life well lived, quality experiences, enjoying the journey as we go, felt like the essence of almost like a manifesto for, hey, look, put a bit more enjoyment back into your life.
That's so good to hear. It's one of my favorite quotes. It's a quote by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And a big part of my motivation in writing this book was to honor his work and to try to continue his legacy. And Mike was known by those who knew and worked with him as living what he wrote and researched about. And I think that it's such an important understanding for us to take on board about life and what is a good life. It does come down to the quality of experience along the way. And we all know that. But sometimes that quality of experience gets lost or sacrificed in the name of something else, some short-term gain.
Yeah. Hey, well, thank you for writing such a compelling book. And the time has flown today, which I wonder is a good little characteristic of our conversation. So thank you so much for joining me, Sue.
Well, thank you for your excellent questions and for, really asking pertinent questions about flow, and that hopefully the readers have got a good appreciation for it now through the conversation we've had. So it's been really enjoyable. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. If you did, please take a chance to press like and subscribe to the channel. And for audio, please do leave a review. Thank you.